In the vast wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, rangers had been monitoring an extraordinary pair of bobcats for 3 months. The pregnant bobcat lay hidden in a cave, her breathing labored and her strength fading. Nearby, her devoted mate stayed by her side as she prepared to give birth. Every day, the male searched ceaselessly, bringing back bunnies and birds to feed her. But one day, while the male was away on a hunt, the female's labor turned catastrophic. Sarah and the rangers faced an impossible choice. Let nature take its course, or intervene and risk everything to save a wild family. As the exhausted mother's strength faded, a ranger made the dangerous call to step in, the very moment the male bobcat returned. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun crept over the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains, casting long shadows across the Mesa Verde Wildlife Reserve in southwestern Colorado. Senior wildlife ranger Sarah Mitchell adjusted her binoculars, scanning the rugged terrain that had been her workplace for nearly 2 decades. The reserve sprawled across 30,000 acres of pristine wilderness, a sanctuary where nature's drama unfolded daily, mostly hidden from human eyes. Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Sarah, you seeing what I'm seeing near Devil's Creek?" The voice belonged to Tom Rodriguez, another veteran ranger stationed at the Northern Observation Post. "The bobcat pair?" Sarah responded, already knowing the answer. For 3 months now, the entire ranger team had been monitoring an unusual bobcat couple that had made their den near the creek's rocky outcropping. What made them remarkable wasn't just their proximity to the ranger station, though that was unusual enough, but their extraordinary bond. Bobcats were typically solitary creatures, coming together only during mating season before parting ways. But this pair had remained together long after typical courtship behavior would have ended. The male, distinguished by a distinctive notch in his left ear from some long-ago territorial dispute, had become a devoted provider to his heavily pregnant mate. "He's out hunting again," Tom reported. "3rd time since dawn. That female must be close to delivering." Sarah trained her scope on the den site, a natural cave formation partially concealed by a tumble of boulders and desert willows. The female bobcat lay just inside the entrance, her swollen sides rising and falling with labored breaths. Even from a distance, Sarah could see the exhaustion written in every line of the animal's body. The July heat had arrived early and with vengeance this year. The thermometer at the ranger station had already climbed past 90 degrees, and it wasn't even noon. The usually reliable mountain streams had dwindled to trickles, and the native grasses that typically stayed green through summer had turned to brittle gold weeks ahead of schedule. The drought conditions had made hunting more challenging for all the reserve's predators, but the male bobcat had proven remarkably resourceful. Sarah watched as he returned from his latest foray, a desert cottontail clamped in his jaws. His movements were efficient, purposeful, each muscle working in perfect coordination as he navigated the rocky terrain. At roughly 30 pounds, he was a magnificent specimen of his species, his tawny coat marked with the distinctive spots and bars that provided perfect camouflage among the shadows and sunlight of his territory. The female emerged partially from the den to accept his offering. Sarah noticed how the male lingered, unusual behavior for a species known for quick, businesslike interactions. He groomed her face briefly before padding away to a nearby rock outcropping that served as his lookout post. From there, he could survey the approach to the den while remaining close enough to respond to any threat. "That's devotion you don't see every day," muttered Jake Harper, the newest member of the ranger team, who had joined Sarah at her observation point. Fresh out of Colorado State University with a degree in wildlife biology, Jake brought enthusiasm and updated scientific knowledge to the team, though he still had much to learn about reading the subtle signs of animal behavior in the field. "No, you don't," Sarah agreed, lowering her binoculars. "In 20 years, I've never seen anything quite like it. Most male bobcats would have moved on to establish territory elsewhere by now." The afternoon wore on with the oppressive heat building like a physical presence. The metal equipment at the ranger station became too hot to touch, and heat mirages shimmered off the rocks, making observation difficult. Sarah noticed the female bobcat had retreated deeper into the den, seeking relief from the temperature. The male remained at his post, panting in the shade but alert. Then, around 4 o'clock, the weather began to shift. Clouds that had been building over the western peaks suddenly darkened and spread across the sky with surprising speed. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes, and the wind picked up, sending dust devils spinning across the dry creek bed. "Storm coming in fast," Tom's voice crackled over the radio. "Weather Service is saying possible flash flooding in the arroyos. We should warn the camping areas." Sarah acknowledged the message but kept her attention on the bobcat den. Something in the female's behavior had changed. She had emerged from the cave and was pacing in tight circles, her movements agitated and uncomfortable. Every few steps she would stop and contract, her body tensing with what were unmistakably labor pains. "Jake, get the medical kit from the truck," Sarah said quietly. "And radio Margaret at the Wildlife Veterinary Center. Tell her we might need consultation." "You think we'll need to intervene?" Jake asked, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and concern. "I hope not," Sarah replied, but her experienced eye was already cataloging worrying signs. The female's pacing had become more frantic, and her vocalizations, usually limited to mating calls or warning hisses, had taken on a quality of distress that made Sarah's chest tighten with sympathy. The male bobcat had noticed the change too. He abandoned his lookout post and approached his mate, but she snarled at him, causing him to retreat a few feet. He settled into a crouch, watching her with an intensity that was almost human in its concern. The first fat raindrops began to fall, creating small craters in the dusty ground. Within minutes, the drops became a downpour. Lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed seconds later by thunder that echoed off the canyon walls. The male bobcat retreated under a rock overhang, but the female seemed oblivious to the storm, consumed by the overwhelming demands of her body. Sarah and Jake had taken shelter under a small tarp they'd strung between two junipers, but Sarah never took her eyes off the laboring bobcat. Through the rain, she could see the female's struggles intensifying. The cat would push, straining with visible effort, then collapse, panting heavily. This pattern repeated over and over, but no cubs appeared. "How long has she been in active labor?" Margaret's voice came through the radio, professional and calm despite the static caused by the storm. "At least an hour of hard contractions," Sarah reported. "She's exhausted. I'm seeing signs of distress, excessive panting, dilated pupils, and she's becoming less responsive to external stimuli." "First-time mother?" "We believe so, based on her age and size." There was a pause, then Margaret's voice returned. "Bobcats typically deliver within 2 to 3 hours of active labor starting. If she's struggling this much, there could be a malpositioned kit. In the wild, this often means..." Margaret didn't need to finish. Sarah knew the statistics. Complications during birth were one of the leading causes of mortality for wild cats. Without intervention, both mother and cubs could be lost. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the dry creek bed into a rushing torrent of muddy water. The den site was on higher ground, but Sarah could see water beginning to pool at the entrance. The female bobcat had collapsed on her side, her sides heaving with each breath. Her pushes were becoming weaker, less coordinated. "We have to do something," Jake said, his voice tight with emotion. Sarah wrestled with the decision. The prime directive of wildlife management was to let nature take its course, to avoid human interference that could disrupt natural processes or create dependency. But watching this devoted pair struggle, seeing the male's obvious distress as he paced near his exhausted mate, Sarah felt the rules bend under the weight of compassion. "Margaret, talk me through it," she said into the radio. "What would you do if this was a captive birth?" "You'd need to check for obstruction first. If a kid is stuck in the birth canal, gentle manipulation might help. But Sarah, approaching a wild bobcat in labor, the stress alone could—" "I know the risks," Sarah interrupted. She turned to Jake. "Radio Tom and Derek. Tell them to bring the portable blind and the tranquilizer equipment. We're not sedating her. That could harm the cubs. But we need it ready in case the male becomes aggressive." As Jake made the call, Sarah began preparing herself mentally for what she was about to attempt. She'd assisted with dozens of animal births during her career, but never with a fully wild predator in uncontrolled conditions. The rain continued to pound down, and lightning illuminated the scene in stark, momentary flashes. Tom and Derek arrived within 15 minutes, their truck sliding through the mud. Derek Washington, a former Army medic who'd found his second career in wildlife management, immediately understood the situation. "Never thought I'd be delivering bobcat babies," he said, pulling on latex gloves. "We move slowly, no sudden movements," Sarah instructed. "Tom, you and Jake set up a visual barrier between us and the male. Don't block him completely. We need him to see we're not threats. But give us some protection. Derek, you're with me." The team moved into position with practiced efficiency. The portable blind, essentially a camouflaged screen, created a partial barrier while still allowing the male bobcat to observe. Sarah could see him, pressed against the rock face, every muscle tense but not actively aggressive. His eyes never left his mate. Sarah approached the female slowly, speaking in a low, continuous tone. "Easy, Mama. We're here to help. Just stay calm." The bobcat's eyes tracked her movement, but she was too exhausted to react defensively. Sarah could see the problem immediately. A tiny paw was visible, but the kit appeared to be positioned incorrectly. "Breach presentation," she told Derek. "The first kit is coming backwards." Working with incredible gentleness, Sarah tried to ease the kit into a better position. The female bobcat tensed but didn't fight. It was as if she understood on some instinctual level that these strange creatures were trying to help. Or perhaps she was simply too exhausted to resist. "There," Sarah breathed as she felt the kit shift. "Come on, Mama, one more push." The female bobcat bore down, and suddenly the first kit emerged, a tiny, wet form that Sarah quickly cleared of mucus. The kit mewed weakly, and the sound seemed to energize the mother. She turned, instinctively licking the baby, stimulating its breathing. "One down," Derek said quietly. "She's contracting again." The second kit came more easily, followed 20 minutes later by a third. Each time, Sarah and Derek assisted minimally, just enough to ensure safe delivery, then immediately backed away to allow the mother to bond with her newborns. The rain had begun to lessen, though water still ran in rivulets around the den entrance. It was as the third kit was being cleaned by its mother that the male bobcat made his move. Sarah heard Jake's warning shout and turned to see the male approaching, but not in the aggressive charge she'd feared. He moved deliberately, carrying fresh prey, a wood rat he'd somehow managed to catch despite the storm. His eyes were fixed not on the humans, but on his family. "Nobody move," Sarah commanded softly. The male bobcat dropped the prey near the den entrance, then paused, seeming to assess the situation. His gaze swept over the humans, the newborn cubs, and his exhausted mate. Sarah held her breath, aware that this moment would determine whether their intervention would be seen as help or invasion. Then, in a movement that brought tears to Sarah's eyes, the male simply walked past them. Not aggressively, not fearfully, but with the purposeful stride of a father returning to his family. He settled beside his mate and began grooming her face while she nursed the 3 cubs. The tableau they created, the devoted pair with their new family, surrounded by the dissipating storm, was one of the most beautiful things Sarah had witnessed in her career. "Let's go," she whispered to her team, slowly, quietly. The Rangers retreated, gathering their equipment with minimal noise. As they reached their vehicles, Sarah turned for one last look. The male bobcat was standing guard at the den entrance, his posture protective but calm. Inside, just visible in the improving light, the female was curled around 3 tiny forms, their small bodies rising and falling with healthy breaths. "What now?" Jake asked, his voice full of wonder at what they'd just experienced. "Now we monitor from a distance," Sarah replied. "We'll need to ensure they have adequate prey in the area. Maybe coordinate with the hunting management team to restrict human activity nearby for the next few months. Those cubs will need time to grow strong before they face the challenges of life in the wild." Over the following weeks, the ranger team maintained a careful watch over the bobcat family. They documented the cubs' development, noting when their eyes opened at around 10 days, when they first ventured out of the den at 4 weeks, and when they began accompanying their parents on hunting expeditions at 3 months. The male continued his devoted care, bringing food not just for his mate, but teaching the cubs essential hunting skills as they grew. Sarah submitted a detailed report of the incident to the Colorado Division of Wildlife, recommending special protection status for the area around the den site. The report sparked interest from wildlife biologists across the country, as such devoted paternal behavior in bobcats was rarely documented. Several research grants were approved to study the family, though always from a respectful distance. Jake, profoundly moved by the experience, decided to focus his career on wild cat conservation. He would go on to establish a nonprofit organization dedicated to preserving critical habitat for bobcats and mountain lions throughout the Rocky Mountain region, always citing that stormy afternoon as the moment his calling became clear. Derek incorporated the experience into his wilderness first aid training courses, teaching a new generation of rangers that sometimes the line between intervention and interference wasn't as clear-cut as the textbook suggested. Compassion, tempered with knowledge and respect, could guide difficult decisions in the field. Tom used the story in his educational programs with local schools, helping children understand that wild animals, while different from humans, experience their own forms of family bonds and devotion. The tale of the bobcat pair became legendary in the region, inspiring countless young people to pursue careers in conservation. But it was Sarah who was most profoundly affected. The image of the male bobcat, choosing trust over aggression, accepting help for his struggling mate, stayed with her through the remainder of her career. She would often return to the observation point above Devil's Creek, watching as the cubs grew into independent hunters, eventually dispersing to establish their own territories. The female and male remained together, defying typical bobcat behavior, raising a second litter the following year without incident. They became known as the bonded pair of Mesa Verde, subjects of numerous documentaries and research papers, but always wild, always free. Years later, when Sarah retired, she gave a speech at the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Dinner. She spoke about the many animals she'd encountered, the successes and failures, the harsh realities of nature and the moments of unexpected grace. But she ended with the story of that storm-lashed afternoon, when human hands helped bring 3 bobcat cubs into the world, and a devoted father chose trust over instinct. "We are stewards of these wild spaces," she concluded, "not masters of them. Our role is to protect, to preserve, and occasionally, very occasionally, to offer a helping hand when nature's own courage needs just a little human compassion to see it through." That day, we weren't rangers or scientists. We were simply fellow creatures, sharing a moment of life's most fundamental miracle. And in that moment, the boundary between wild and human didn't divide us. It connected us in the most profound way possible. The audience rose in standing ovation, but Sarah's mind was back on that mountainside, remembering the weight of those tiny cubs in her hands, the exhausted gratitude in the mother's eyes, and the remarkable trust of a wild father who understood that sometimes, even in nature, we all need a little help. The Bobcat family story became more than just a remarkable wildlife incident. It became a testament to the complex emotional lives of wild animals, the importance of compassionate conservation, and the delicate balance between human intervention and natural processes. It reminded everyone who heard it that in the vast wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, amid the harsh realities of survival, love, and devotion, flourish in forms we're only beginning to understand. The Mesa Verde Wildlife Reserve expanded its boundaries the following year, incorporating additional critical habitat for bobcats and other predators. The protected area around Devil's Creek became a research site for studying bobcat behavior, generating valuable data that would influence conservation strategies throughout the western United States. But more than that, it became a symbol of hope, proof that when humans approach nature with respect, knowledge, and compassion, miracles can indeed happen. As the years passed, occasional sightings of the original cubs, now adults with territories of their own, were reported throughout the region. Some claimed to have seen similar devoted pairs, male bobcats staying with their mates through pregnancy and birth. Though whether this was learned behavior or simple coincidence remained a subject of scientific debate. What wasn't debatable was the impact that one afternoon's intervention had on everyone who witnessed it and the many more who heard the story. The storm that had threatened tragedy had instead ushered in new life, and the human hands that had reached out to help had forged an unexpected bond between 2 worlds that usually remained carefully separate. In the end, the miracle wasn't just that 3 bobcat cubs survived against the odds. It was that in their survival, humans and wild animals had found a moment of perfect understanding, a bridge across the divide that normally separated them, built from nothing more than compassion, courage, and the universal recognition of love's power to transcend even the boundaries between species.